The Lost Cause, American Civil War, 1861 to 1865, published by Victory Point Games. Thought I'd do a walkthrough, playthrough video of the basic map game. Already set up the game, actually. I'm not going to go through how to set it up. You can do that in the rules. Figure that out yourself. Just real quick, the in this game, you're Confederate President Jefferson Davis, and you're trying to avoid the Union advance into different areas in the South. The map is divided into three basic theaters. You have the Mississippi Theater, the Western Theater, and the Eastern Theater. For game purposes, three particular theaters for the South and two for the North. Basically, the Western Theater for the North includes the Mississippi Theater. You want to, as Confederate player, you want to avoid the Confederate morale going all the way down to 0 on this track, which means immediate defeat for the Confederacy. And at the same time, you want to try to keep this Union blockade track, which starts on 0, along with the European recognition track. They both start on 0, but you want to keep the Union blockade track down as far as possible, while increasing. You want to increase the European recognition track. You'll get some resources from that. So we're going to start in 1861 and go through each one. I'll try to explain a few of the rules and how things work. Hopefully it'll help y'all out there maybe considering getting this game. It's a great game. I really like it a lot, and gives you a lot of decisions to make. So we'll get started here. About to start year 1861. By the way, I forgot to mention the components of the game. Your standard Victory Point Games components. Counters are nice, decent sized counters. The cards, typical stock. They're a little bigger than I thought they'd be compared to some of the other States of Siege series games, so they're pretty nice. I might want to sleeve them up, but decent components. Okay, so let's begin. 1861. First card, McClellan takes command. And the way these cards work is, if you're familiar with the series, we'll go from top to bottom of the card, left to right for the actions. On the top part of the card are the Union actions. The bottom part of the card are the South actions. So McClellan takes command. Blockade runner Fingal enters Savannah with major arms shipment. The first thing we'll do is in the east. The arrow signifies mandatory action. In the east, in the Eastern Theater, flip Scott to McClellan. So we go over here in the Eastern Theater. Scott is commanding over there, so I'm going to flip it over to McClellan. I'll explain how some things work as we get to them. The next thing are these colored, they're either boxes or circles. A box means it's not a direct action that takes place, but it's a conditional action, which means you have to roll, for example, first against the commander's initiative, or actually the Army's initiative, including the modifier of the commander of that theater, and that will determine if the action occurs or not. The colors indicate the types or the different tracks and the armies on those tracks. For example, this first one would be a conditional action for the brown Army, which is the Army of the Tennessee, which has not yet entered play. So that is ignored this turn. Then we have the this last one here is anytime you have a red border around the box, that means you place an initiative marker, which after the Confederates do all their turns, there's a Union initiative check, and I'll explain that when we come to it. So right now we got we have to place a Union initiative marker with the +1 rating, which is right here on the Blue Army, which is the Army of the Potomac. So we'll put that there, and we'll explain how that works when we come to it. So we're finished with the Union turn, Union phase of this card, rather. Then we go down here. The next one's a mandatory resource action, war effort action. And the way that works is we go to the blockade track, which affects, the blockade track will affect resources that we get during the game, which are actually in this resource cup here. For this particular action, war effort action, we have to roll against this table. So anything above where the marker is, which is on 0, we would get a resource marker. So we don't even have to roll. But as in a lot of these games, a 1 is a automatic failure and a 6 is an automatic success. So we have to roll it anyway. It's a 4. So we do get to draw a resource marker. Mix them up. And we draw forts. A forts resource marker. And I'll explain that. If I decide to use that, I'll explain what that means. If you notice in the upper left-hand corner, there's an X on this particular marker, which means once you use, it's only a one-time use thing. Once it's used, it's discarded. So we'll put that in the available Confederate resources. Next action is in the Eastern Theater. Now, since it's a circle here, that means it's a direct action. It happens without any initiative rolls. So in the Eastern Theater, there's a battle action with a +1 die roll modifier for the battle. There is in the East, that should have started there. Sorry. We do have the Army of the Potomac. We can battle it. Unfortunately, won't be able to retreat to this invasion spot, northern invasion arrow, because we don't have any northern invasions in 1861. So what we can do, though, is try to remove this initiative chit, which is checked at the end of the turn. So we're going to add 1. The battle number we have to roll is on the right of the counter in the red. And we'll see we also have to include in this roll the battle roll modifier by the commanding officer in that theater, which is Polk. So we'll have to subtract 1 from the roll, and we get the +1 die roll modifier from the card. So it'll just be a straight out roll. We have to roll above this 3 number. So we have to roll a 4, 5, or 6. And it's a 1, so it does not affect, we lost that battle essentially, and nothing happens to that army. Okay, now we come to this last part, and this is the Union initiative check that I talked about, and that's for the Blue Army of the Potomac, where we placed this marker earlier. Now we have to roll, we have to add the 1 modifier, and we also go to their commanding officer, which applies its initiative modifier right here. So but basically they're going to cancel each other out. This is the Army of the Potomac's, the initiative number is on the left of the counter. So we have to roll a 4, 5, or 6 to pass that initiative. It's a 3, so that fails. Initiative marker comes off. And that is the end of the first card. Next card. Winfield Scott proposes Anaconda Plan. Rebels capture Norfolk Navy Yard. Okay, here's where we're going to get some placement of an army. As you can see, this yellow triangle has an asterisk, and it says, if not in play, place the Army of the James in Fortress Monroe. Well, the Army of the James is not in play yet. What's this yellow army here? And we're going to place that on the yellow track in Fortress Monroe. And that's basically all those triangles do, or place armies. And then the next box is a conditional check on the Green Army. Initiative check on the Green Army. Green Army is not yet on the map, so we avoid that one. And then we got the red box around the yellow Army initiative marker we have to place. So we go to the initiative markers. There's 4 of them. And just a regular old square. Place that on the yellow Army for check later at the end of the turn. Okay, next, going down the card, we have a blockade, mandatory blockade, naval action. Again, we go to the blockade track. Or we go to the blockade track, actually. And we move the naval blockade marker up 1. So it moves up to the 1 box. Okay, again, we want to keep this track as low as possible. So we can get a good supply of resources rolling in. Finished with the Union phase of this card. Go to the Confederate phase of this card. Mandatory resource, war effort draw. And as we remember, last card we had to roll against this track. What did we do? We did it right. Last card we had to roll against the blockade track for this war effort action to get a resource card. This particular card says draw, so we automatically draw from the resource cup. And this time we draw an ironclads marker. Put that in available resources. We can use those things for certain actions. Matter of fact, we can use one right now because the next action is a naval action, mandatory. And the way the naval actions work, the first thing you have to do is roll against the command action number here for the National Military Advisor. And you have to subtract 1 as a modifier. So for us to roll above that would be success. So we'd have to roll a 6 or a 5 with the -1 modifier. But that's the first thing we have to do. So we need a 6 or a 5. And it's a 1. So we cannot place that. You cannot do a naval action, basically. The next one is a command action. It is a square, so therefore it is conditional. There are lots of things we can do. Command options here, we can pass along a battle action, is basically battle, perform a battle. We can place a fort resource, which we do have a fort in our resources. Naval action, which will require, again, a couple rolls. Or we could do a leader shuffle where we're removing and replacing some leaders that are in command. And I'll just describe those as I do them. I think what we're going to do here, though, is we are going to place a fort resource as a command action. Now, again, it's the square, so we have to roll against. First thing we have to roll is against the Confederate National Military Advisor's number. There is no modifier for this roll, though, so we need a 4, 5, or 6. And again, we fail. So nothing. Nothing. Not looking good so far. Not able to do much. Last part is a Union initiative check against that Army of the James, which we placed earlier. Their initiative number is a 4. they have a -1 modifier for McClellan. So we'd have to roll a 6, basically, for them to pass that initiative check, and we do. So what that means is they can do an army action. And the first thing they'll do is remove disruption, which they had none. Eliminate gunboats if there was a marker on it. There was none. Combat the ironclad, which was one on it, which happened to river spaces, and there were none. Siege fortifications, it's not in a fort. Advanced bases are not included in the basic game. So basically it's going to march and advance 1 space. So the Army of the James goes up to Peninsula from Fortress Monroe. And that ends the second card. Card number 3, we'll go to the next card. And it is Grant moves south. British steamer Bermuda challenges blockade. First symbol we have there is a conditional check, initiative check on the Blue Army, which is the Army of the Potomac up here. So we have to roll against its initiative, which is a 3. And we have to include the -1 modifier from McClellan, so we have to roll a 6 or a 5 to pass that, because remember, we got to roll higher than the 3. Okay, it's a 3, so that fails. So go to the next one is a triangle, which places the Army of the Cumberland in Louisville. Go to the Army of the Cumberland. Oh, wrong side. Place the Army of the Cumberland in Louisville. And the next is a direct action for the Army of the Cumberland, which we just placed, and that will be to move. All right. And then we go, the next one's another triangle with a asterisk in it, and we'll be placing the Army of the Tennessee in Cairo, which is the Brown Army. So we go to the Army of the Tennessee, placing that in Cairo, and they will also have a direct action, the circle, which means they'll move, and they'll move into Forts Henry and Donelson, and may be able to remove that soon. And we're going to be placing an initiative marker on that Army of the Tennessee. So we'll do that. Now we go down to the Confederate turn. It's again a resource war effort action. We'll be rolling against the blockade track. We need to roll above where the naval marker is, so we need to roll 2 or greater. And it's a 6, so we do get to draw another resource here. And this is a coastal fort, which is good to have for a few reasons we'll explain later. The next action is a direct battle action in the Western Theater, in which A.S. Johnston is commanding. So we can actually battle this Army of the Cumberland and try to force them back to Louisville. There are no modifiers here. If there was a battle modifier, it would be included on the right side of Johnston's counter. So we just have to roll 4, 5, or 6 against the Army of the Cumberland. And it's a 5, so we can move them back to Louisville. The next action is a battle action in the Mississippi Theater, which is on this side where J. Johnston is commanding. So we can actually battle here the Army of the Tennessee. No modifiers. We need to roll 4, 5, or 6 against them as well. 5. And when they have the initiative markers on there and they retreat, you remove the initiative marker and move them out of there. You want to keep them out of those forts, because once they, if you notice, some of these spaces, key spaces on the board, have these rebel flags on them. If they control those spaces, you will lose that many flags on the morale. You'll lose that many spaces on the morale track. Remember, we want to keep this up. So, okay, that's that. And we go to the Union initiative check, which would have been on the Army of the Tennessee, but we removed it through battle. So there is no initiative check, and that ends that card. We go to the next card. On to Richmond. General Line killed at Wilson's Creek, Missouri. First symbol is a direct action for the Army of the Potomac, and that'll be to move to Manassas. Okay. Then we have a direct action for the Army of the Cumberland. They will move back into Lexington and Bowling Green. Next action is a conditional initiative check action for the Army of the Tennessee. So we have to roll against their initiative, which is a 2. We have a -1 modifier. So we have to roll a 6, a 5, a 4, 6, a 5, or 4. Pass that check, and we do. So Army of the Tennessee will move back into Fort Donelson. And lastly, we'll place, with the red box around the blue symbol, we'll place an initiative marker on the Army of the Potomac. Go down to the Confederate phase. There is a battle action in the Eastern Theater, a direct action with a +1 modifier. So we will battle. We could battle either the Army of the James or the Army of the Potomac, since Potomac has an initiative marker on it, though, and a higher battle. With this +1 modifier, we're going to go ahead and battle them. And Polk does have a -1 battle modifier, so that kind of cancels out the +1 that we get from the card. So we have to roll a 4, 5, or 6 to defeat the Army of the Potomac, and we don't. So next action is a conditional action, a command action. It includes many things we could do. Let me think about it for a sec. As a command action, I'm going to go ahead and try to push the Army of the Tennessee back out of that fort. And since it is a conditional action, I have to roll against the initiative first of the commander of that theater. So I have to roll 4, 5, or 6 to even perform this action, and it's good. So I can battle them, the Army of the Tennessee, and there's no modifier, so I have to roll a 4, 5, or 6 to push them back. Roll 1, so they stay put. The next part is a mandatory morale die roll. We roll a die. It is a 5. 4, 5, or 6, we gain 1 morale, which is good. We move the morale up. And lastly, initiative check from the initiative marker we placed on the Army of the Potomac. So we have to roll against their initiative, which is a 3. Subtract 1 from McClellan, either a 6 or a 5. Roll a 6, so they pass that check. So they will advance from Manassas into Fredericksburg. And that ends that card. Next card. Halleck now commands the West. Navy seizes Southern envoys on British mail packet Trent. First thing is a mandatory action in the West. In the Western Theater, we'll flip Fremont to Halleck. Okay, we're here in the Western Theater. We're going to flip Fremont to Halleck as commander now in the West for the Union. Then we go right across. We have a conditional initiative check for the Army of the Potomac. He's a 3 with a -1 modifier from McClellan. And that's another pass. So we move them from Fredericksburg to the Wilderness. Next is a conditional check for the Army of the Tennessee, which is a 2. No modifier this time because Halleck's now in command there. So 3, 4, 5, or 6, and he fails, so he stays put. And then we place a -1 initiative marker on the Army of the Cumberland, the Green Army. This is -1. Oop, wrong one. And we'll check that at the end of the turn, unless I remove it somehow. Okay, the first thing that the Confederates can do is a naval action. Now, naval actions can include placing or removing gunboats, ironclads, or coastal forts. Torpedoes can also be used, but I don't have any of those yet, and I'll explain it if I get any. So I can actually try to use the ironclads or the coastal forts. And ironclads can be used either against the blockade track to keep this naval marker from moving, or can be used in any river space, which, as you can see, some of the spaces have the water lines designating a river space. Coastal forts can only be used against this track here to keep this blockade marker from moving. So let me think about what I'm going to do here. What to do is try to place an ironclad over here along with this Fort Henry and Donelson. Really make it tough on the Army of Tennessee to get by there. But I probably should have did this first, but I got to roll against the National Military Advisor's command rating, which is a 3, a 4. So it has, I have to subtract 1 from it though, because it's a naval command, so actually a fail. So I wasted all that time for nothing. So we go to the next. It's a direct battle action in the Eastern Theater. We're going to go ahead and battle the Army of the Potomac. Again with the -1 battle modifier from Polk. I might want to try to swap him out soon because that's hurting me over there. It's a very important Richmond, Petersburg, very important. There's a lot of morale there if I give that up. So, but for now, I got to roll a 6 or a 5 to defeat them. Nope. Man, getting some bad rolls here. Next is a battle action, direct battle action in the Western Theater. We'll roll against the Army of the Cumberland. No modifier here. Need a 4, 5, and 6. Yes. So again, we push them back, remove the initiative marker, push them back to Louisville. Next is a command action, and it's conditional. So let's see. We're going to try to push. Actually, we're going to go ahead and try to place a fort this time, and you have to roll against the National Military Advisor. Got to roll. There's no modifier to this roll, 4, 5, or 6, and we get it. We're going to place a fort, and we're going to place it in Hanover. And what that'll do is, if the Army of the Potomac does reach there, they'll have to get through that fort first before they can eliminate that fort before they can move on. Okay, the next is. We haven't done this yet. Europe diplomatic action, mandatory. So we go to the European recognition track. Got to roll higher than where the marker is. So anything we roll will pass except the 1, because the 1's automatic defeat. And roll 3. So we actually move this European recognition marker up to the 1, which is what we want to do. We want to move this up farther. Helps us out a lot. And Union initiative check. There's none on any counters because we removed 1 from a battle. So that ends that card. Rebels invade Kentucky. General Butler captures Hatteras Inlet. First one places the Army of the Cumberland, which is already on the board. So we go to the next. And Army of the Cumberland will move. Army of the Tennessee is already on the board. Army of the Tennessee will move. Now, as we go down the Army priority, normally if we got through all these, the last thing they would do would be move. But since there's a fort there, they will try to siege that fort before they can do anything else. So now it's a direct action, so they can try to take this fort, and you have to roll higher than their defense value, which is a 2, so no modifiers on this. Okay, so they do remove the forts. Take that off. They don't control this space yet. They have, for the Union to control a space, they actually have to move past it to control it. So, and once they do that, we would lose on the morale track 1 flag or 1 space. So we go back here. The next is to place an initiative marker on the Army of the Cumberland. Do that. Okay. On to the Confederate phase of the card. There's a direct battle action in the West, which is here with Johnston, A. Johnston. We're going to battle the Army of the Cumberland. No modifiers. No. Fail. Next, direct battle action in the Mississippi Theater on this side with J. Johnston. So we can try to knock the Army of the Tennessee back out. And we will do that. New modifiers, need a 4, 5, or 6. Yes, so we do move them back to Cairo, however you say it. And lastly, the initiative check for the Army of the Tennessee. We have to roll a 4, 5, or 6. There's no modifier here. And we do. So they will advance to Nashville. And that ends that card. Okay, going to the next card. Lincoln calls volunteers to suppress insurrection. Secessionists seize Harper's Ferry Armory. Okay, we have a placement marker here. If not in play, place the Army of the James, which we already have. Then we got an initiative or a conditional initiative check for the Army of the Potomac. There are 3, -1 modifier for McClellan. 4, -1 is a 3, so they fail that check. So we're done on that part of the card. Next is a resource war effort draw. Just roll. Remember, we don't have to roll. That one just says draw, so we draw a resource. And we drew some torpedoes. And what torpedoes can do is, if the naval marker, if there's a blockade action for it to move, you can use a torpedo and it stops that move. Or if any army is activated in its space to move along that's in a river space, you can use a torpedo to keep that from happening as well. Lastly is a CSA command action. Let me think about what I want to do. Decide I'm going to try to do a naval action. Again, this time I have to roll twice. I actually have to pass a check against the military advisor first, and then do it again with a -1 modifier to use a naval action. Anytime it's a conditional command action and you want to do a naval action, you have to make 2 rolls. So first I got to roll higher than 3, and I don't. So it's a wasted command action, and that ends that turn. And we'll just go to the next card. Next card is Flag Officer DuPont captures Port Royal, South Carolina. Navy seizes Ship Island in the Mississippi Gulf. And the first symbol here is placing an army. And we're going to be placing the Army of the Gulf in the Ship Island. They're not yet on the board, so we're going to place them in Ship Island down here. Next is a conditional initiative check for the Army of the Tennessee. It's a 2. We got to roll a 3 or above. No modifiers from Halleck. And it passes, so they move back into Forts Henry and Donelson. Still don't control that yet. And then we place an initiative marker on the Army of the Gulf, which was just entered play. We'll check that at the end. Blockade naval action, which would move this naval marker up, but we're going to spend a torpedo. And this particular marker has the X in upper left-hand corner, so that means you have to discard it from the game. You can't throw it back in the cup. So prevented that from moving up. Next we go to the Confederate turn, command action. I think the first thing we're going to do again is, and this is a conditional command action, first thing we're going to do is try to get the Army of the Tennessee back out again. So first we got to roll against the initiative of J. Johnston, and we fail. And this time we got a direct command action, so we don't have to pass an initiative check. So we are going to battle the Army of the Tennessee. No modifiers from Johnston, 4, 5, or 6. And we get it, moving back out of there again. Okay, Union initiative check is the last thing. And we placed on the Army of the Gulf. Their initiative is a 4, no modifiers from Halleck. So we got to roll a 5 or a 6 to pass that check. And they don't, so that ends that card. We go to the last card here of 1861. Lincoln declares blockade of southern ports. Britain grants South belligerent status. First symbol is a Army of the Tennessee conditional initiative check. So again, it's a 2, no modifiers. Get out of there. And we pass, so they move back in the Fort Henry and Donelson. And then for the Army of the Cumberland initiative check. conditional check. It's a 3. And he passes, so he will move into Chattanooga. I'm going to try to get them out of there as well, because there's a morale flag there. Blockade naval action. This naval marker moves up 1. If I had a torpedo, I could have used it there, but didn't. Now we go to the Confederate phase of the card. Command action. I'm going to go ahead and we're going to go ahead and do a naval action. Since it is a direct action, we don't have to roll for initiative against the military advisor. We only have to roll once with a -1 modifier. We're going to do a naval action here. And we fail. Failed again. For some reason that Navy don't want to get it into gear here. And then lastly, the Europe diplomatic action. That's this table. Remember, we have to roll higher than the marker. A 2. So we do, and it moves up. Okay, and that ends 1861. We got some year-end sequence things to do here. Okay, that finishes 1861. We go here to the year-end sequence. First thing we do is look at the blockade track. If it's on a 6, which it's not, we would lose 1 morale. Check to see if the Mississippi River is closed, which would only occur if the Union controlled Vicksburg. So that's not, it doesn't, is not in effect. Election of 1864 is at the end of the game. We're not in 1864 yet, so advance the year marker. So we're going to do that, move it to 1862. And when we do, we take the reinforcement counters, if you want to call them those. There's an ironclad marker that goes in with the resource cup, and there's another Southern Commander Pemberton goes in with the leader cup. Those are added. International phase, this time we're looking at the European recognition track. If it was in a 6, the blockade marker would drop down 1. And if it was in 5 or 6, we would draw another resource marker. None of those would happen. Also, if all armies are at the home base, which are the triangle bases, or if any are in their northern invasion spaces, which are the arrows, then I would go up 1 on the European track. Now, next is draw 1 resource for the domestic phase. Draw 1 resource if the Union is not in Richmond. They are not, so I can draw another resource. Mix those up. And we have picked up another torpedo, which are always good to have. And then we do a morale roll here. And what if we roll less than the morale marker, then we will get either a resource or morale, or pick up another morale. Chances here, whoops, chances here, an 8. So if we roll less than the morale, we get either a resource or a morale. I'm going to move this up to 12, because we want to keep that up as high as we can. And then we're going to finally set up next year's draw pile. 1862 has been shuffled and ready for play. And we'll be back shortly to move to 1862.